About 2 years ago, we had some odd occurrences at our home. It was around late September, early October, as the leaves were changing colour, and you could really feel autumn in the air. If you live in the Midwest or live in a place that has seasonal changes, the fall air smells different. We were decorating for Halloween, so things got moved around a bit in the front lawn to make room for the decor. We didn't think much of anything until things started to go missing at home. A few weeks prior to decorating, I purchased a set of Bluetooth earbuds that I use on a daily basis and carried in my pocket when I went out. After decorating, I went out to a local Target to pick up some groceries and some additional string lights. Later that evening, when I got a call, I looked for my earbuds and couldn't find them anywhere. I was a bit upset and chalked it up to maybe it fell out of my pocket at Target. The next day, I went back up to Target just to make sure. Retraced my steps and checked lost and found. Nothing. Grieving for my loss, I bought another exact pair at Bezos's, and 2 days later, the new package arrived at my doorstep, smiley tape and all. All is well again in our little world until a few days later when I was preparing our dinner. We wanted to do Korean barbecue at home, and we have a tabletop Korean barbecue grill pan. I looked in its usual spot, the corner kitchen cabinet. For the love of all things tasty, I hated the corner cabinet. It's where appliances and old pans are sent to live out their days in the dark, web-filled corners. Rarely thought of and visited until we just so happened to be in the neighbourhood. The grill pan was not there. We took everything out of the corner cabinet, and it wasn't there. I even had my wife lend a pair of eyes. She went as far as crawling into the Dominion, armed with her cell phone flashlight, to see if we could rescue the grill pan from the depths. But no luck. It was lost, forever in the darkness. As my wife resurfaced from the corner cabinet, and as I wrapped up reminiscing old times with my tomato pan and the old fondue set, dinner was a bust that night. 2 items missing back to back. Could it be a coincidence? My wife and I spoke. She mentioned that recently she saw a TikTok about Fae and how they can be mischievous. Of course, TikTok to the rescue. Being spiritual, this wouldn't be our first encounter with Fae, as my wife had many offerings to them in the past for our garden, etc. But this made me think and turn to our all-knowing acquaintance, Google. Come to find out, moving things in the garden and in the yard can disturb their habitat and the places they reside. This can result in angering them. Understandable. I'd be pretty pissed if I came home from work and my house was moved a few blocks over. So, new knowledge in hand, I went out into our front lawn and apologised out loud, and explained that we didn't mean to disturb them, and that we were only preparing for the holidays. I left out an offering of honey, bread and milk. Now, I wait. The next night, the upstairs wrapping up some work. My kiddo ran upstairs with my set of Bluetooth earbuds and handed them over while saying, "Here, Daddy." I said my thank yous and didn't think anything of it. When I set them down on my desk, I realised that my new pair of Bluetooth earbuds were already on my desk. I ran downstairs and asked my wife and kiddo where they found it. My kiddo responded, "Oh, they were just sitting right there on the coffee table." Eyes wide, I explained to my wife. Those were my missing pair of earbuds that I had lost a little over a week ago. We were both speechless as we cleared off the coffee table looking for the earbuds the night it went missing. Later that night, while my wife took a bath and I was preparing dinner, I decided to visit my friend at the tomato pan. I contorted my way into the corner cabinet, phone in hand, to pull out the pan and guess who was sitting there. A Korean grill pan that was missing only 24 hours earlier. We couldn't explain how both of the missing items showed back up, but I told my wife that I had apologised out loud the day before and took out an offering. Sometimes, just because we can't explain it, doesn't mean they don't exist. About 15 years ago, my old high school group decided we were going to attempt to contact my friend, Ben's, biological dad, that had recently died before he got to know him. Now, Ben was absolutely wild. He wasn't scared easily. My high school sweetheart was with us, and he was absolutely terrified. I owned a Native American necklace that had items placed in it for protection from spirits. To help ease his anxiety, I placed the necklace around his neck. We partook in the devil's lettuce and started our session giggling. I was no believer in Ouija boards. It didn't bother me a bit that we decided to do this in an abandoned church deep in the woods either. Only my boyfriend was terrified, which caused our friends to tease him mercilessly. The board was set up and we got serious. We just had no idea how serious this was about to become. As the planchette moved to spell his father's name, I smiled, thinking this was his method of closure. He was clearly doing it because he had refused to share the name beforehand. But looking into his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen etched into his face. It was fear. I can't remember how it all went down, but suddenly the board was spinning and it said murder. I was starting to feel cold, even in the heat. That's when it all went to shit. The pews, already broken, were shaking uncontrollably, even toppling over. We were in a back room that was essentially empty, but we ripped open the door to discover the pews toppling over. It started a massive panic to get out of the building. As I was running, I realised my boyfriend was not with us in the woods. I turned back, right as Ben and a few others pulled off in their cars. Once I re-entered the dilapidated church, my boyfriend was stuck, literally stuck to the floor, screaming. The building was still shaking. It was ice cold and it felt like a sock had been shoved in my mouth. I remember my best friend helping me carry him out of the building. Within an instant, he had his wits about him and refused to talk about what happened. He looked like he'd just been through war. He opted to keep my protection necklace on, citing that the demon may follow one of us. We never really talked about what happened. That was very strange for my very open friend group. We knew it wasn't an earthquake because we lived just an hour below the Blue Ridge Mountains in Appalachia and never get quakes that could move furniture. And to be honest, I felt something dark around me until a cleansing 11 years later, after the scariest haunting I've ever experienced happened. I don't know what we released, or even have any clue how that could have been a natural event. Something threw those church pews to pieces, and we never went back. My boyfriend of 5 years has crushed on me for probably 12 or 13 years. He was 2 grades below me and was a bad boy, while I was popular and in all honours and college level classes, so I wasn't aware he existed until I met him at my dad's business about 7 years ago. He apparently talked about me being his dream girl and was teased that it would never happen, which is why I mention this. So in 2009, he and his best friend, I'll call him Josh, were getting into pills due to Josh's grandfather being an amputee and unable to properly attend hiding the medications, thus leaving large amounts of methadone, clonopin, hydrocodone and such lying around. This was before the opiate crisis that has affected my generation deeply in the last 15 years. 2 days before Christmas 2009, Josh overdosed in the bedroom that my boyfriend is currently staying in. The room has never felt spooky, never anything strange about it. But I've had a few pranks pulled on me that we believe Josh does to basically congratulate my boyfriend on being with the woman he waited for. I've woken up to sticky notes completely covering my body, my drinks poured on the floor, and random objects moved right where I exit the bed so that I step on them first thing in the morning. I swear I've heard giggling. Each time I've angrily asked my boyfriend if he was messing with me, and I'm aware when he's lying, he always says no. We like to think this is Josh, playing practical jokes, something he was known for. But this is nothing compared to what Josh did for me in 2017. It wasn't a prank. It saved my life. 4 years ago, I went into anaphylactic shock. I lost all ability to speak or move my lower body. I was upstairs with a curved and steep staircase separating me from my phone. I remember crawling to the stairs, knowing it could be fatal if I smashed into the wall with the stairs, led to before to turn with very large steep steps. I know I was extremely oxygen deprived, but I immediately saw Josh and two of my deceased best friends ascend the stairs and carry me to the living room couch with my nebulizer and cell phone. I called 911, but I had no voice. My friends were gone, except Josh. He told me he was going to wake my boyfriend from the hammock in the back of my yard. And suddenly, my boyfriend dreamed of his friends saying that I was in trouble. My boyfriend came running into the house, and by this point, I was dying. I no longer could use any part of my body, and no air came into my lungs when I inhaled. I remember thinking of my daughter and praying her father would navigate my loss to her and keep memories of me alive. I struggled to remain conscious, but I was fading. My boyfriend saw the 911 operator on the phone and my sweaty blue body. He told me he didn't think I was breathing, and some absolute miracle, there was an ambulance passing my neighbourhood. The hospital and dispatch were 30 minutes away. This coincidence, plus my boyfriend's sudden premonition that I was hurt, saved my life. Josh and those EMTs saved my life. I remember the EMT asking my boyfriend if I had overdosed, which I hadn't. And I thought of how Josh had died. I was babbling about dead people saving me after a large amount of epinephrine, so no wonder they thought I was high. The doctors said EMT were baffled at how I managed to get down those stairs, or even stay alive long enough to get help. I had one bruise on my leg that was tiny. That was it. And the worst headache I've ever had. Turns out I'm allergic to the latex and spray paint. I just told them I slid down the stairs, but it's not how I remember it. The weird thing is, I'd never met Josh when he was alive. I don't know how I recognised him or hallucinated him, but he looked exactly like the picture I was shown. I've had a lot of paranormal encounters, but my run-in with Josh saved my life, and he never even knew me. Close to 10:30 p.m, me and my friends decided we would go to the playground, as it was just to hang out. We were talking for a while, and then all of a sudden, I got chills and heard a scream. It sounded like it came from the direction of the cave. I turned to my friend, we'll call him A, and asked if he heard it as well. He said he had, but he didn't hear it well. My other friend, we'll call him R, told me and A that it was probably just someone's car tyres, and not to worry. So, now slightly more on edge, we continued our conversations. About 15 minutes later, we all just stopped talking and got chills at the exact same time. A feeling of complete dread and blatant wrongness shot through all of us. R started walking towards the woods to get out. I yelled and said that we needed to go the long way and stay in the light. We ran along the school building, and when we got close to the parking lot, we decided to stop running and take a breather. Again, we got the feeling that something was wrong. Then all of a sudden, the crickets and tree frogs stopped chirping, and whatever it was, screamed again. But this time, it sounded like it was right next to the playground. All of us heard it, and we agreed it didn't sound human or like any of the animals in the area. It made it feel like ice shot through your veins. We ran to my car and hopped in. I locked the doors as soon as I could. I tried to start the car and it didn't start right away. I had to try twice. Once the car started, we drove away. The school zone light outside the parking lot started flashing red. We drove away and made it into town, and the lights in the courthouse went out. We were very spooked and decided just to go to A's house. I still don't know what it was we heard, but it definitely set you on edge. And because the car and the lights acted weird, I think it manipulated them too. Whatever it wasn't good. I just graduated college, and I was an RA in our freshman residence hall for 3 years. My first 2 years I lived on the 6th floor, but for my senior year I was on the 5th floor. Now our dorms are really nice, in a fairly new building, and RAs are given essentially a decent sized studio apartment. Having been at the school for a few years, and the building being newer, I'd known most of the RAs who had ever lived in the room before, so on occasion I'd heard from them that the room was haunted by something. It was never very intense before, but weird things would happen, like knocks on the door late at night. The RA would open the door and there would be no one anywhere in the hallway. Items would disappear and reappear sometime later, in different spots. The bathroom door would lock by itself, and sometimes cabinet doors would open. I'd never experienced it before moving into the room, but after I got settled, all of this happened very frequently. Later on, my friends and I would start to see shadows manifesting briefly as well. It wasn't fun to deal with on top of a stressful senior year. Here's some of the most interesting stuff that occurred that I found out during my senior year living in that room. I went to an art school, and we had lots of students battling depression and anxiety. There have been quite a few suicide attempts from residential students. And after lots of asking, I discovered that all of the attempts over the years had happened on the 5th floor. One of my residents, who ended up dropping out a few months into school, was having lots of problems with her roommates. One of the things they complained about was that she insisted on practicing with a Ouija board on the right side of the room. I found out from previous residents of that 5th floor room that this was the 3rd time in a row that the exact situation had happened. The girl's name was Alex, and so were the other 2 girls' names before her trying to do the same thing, and all dropped out months later. Once word of this thing's got around more than it had ever before, the freshmen started referring to it as the Uptown Ghost. Other RAs, who used to be skeptics, began to dread doing their duty rounds because they'd hear footsteps right behind them. Lights would turn off, or they would hear whispering in rooms that were vacant because of holidays. Going to an art school, one of the freshmen actually drew the thing and hung it up in the hallway. I regret to say I didn't snag a picture of it, but I was on a late night round and was already spooked when I saw the drawing. I just cried and threw it in the trash. The scariest part, though, is that the drawing matched what my one friend, who's a self-identified sensitive person, had described months prior. A skinny, tall shadow, and with an unhinged jaw and unrealistic arms that dragged onto the ground. How everything wrapped up was that I reached out to a friend that I knew had very strong religious ties and beliefs, and parents who turned out to be my saving grace. They didn't refer to themselves as such, but I essentially equate them to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Her mom claimed to be able to see spirits, and her father claimed to be able to hear the word of God. The experience of them cleansing my room was itself something I'll never forget. They claimed there was spiritual residue in my room from years of activity, and it mostly collected near the ceiling. They told me that they cleansed my room, but more importantly, gave me the power to banish the spirit from my presence, which proved true as the second semester rolled around, and everyone else continued to experience things, but I never did again. The new RA who lives in that room now still texts me to this day, saying that after I moved out, the spirit moved right back into the 5th floor RA room, and she experienced everything I did when I first lived there. Overall, I do blame myself for giving the thing so much attention, and therefore power, throughout the months I lived there. But I also attribute its overwhelming activity in my presence to my spirituality or religious beliefs. I still don't know exactly what it was, or how I got into such a new building, but it's always interesting to hear other people's opinions on it, and it feels good to know that in the end, I overcame it. So I was about 6 or 7, and the year was 2000. Me and my older sister slept in my parents' room, in a small bed that belonged to our younger brother. I can't remember why we didn't sleep in our room that night, but I think we were scared of the dark, like most children. Our bedroom was about 2 feet from our parents', and it was directly across from their room. We lived in one of those apartments with the kitchen and living room on the 1st floor, and the bedrooms and bathroom on the 2nd floor. So my parents' bed is to the left of us, and there's a small gap in between both beds. And unfortunately, on the outside of the bed next to the gap. My sister wakes me up and she keeps saying to look at the end of the beds. I've never been more scared in my life. It was one of those Cat in the Hat dolls with the pull bow tie. It was literally walking towards us. It radiated pure evil. Keep in mind, it was purely cotton, or whatever material it had stuffed inside, but it was definitely not a toy that could move by itself. I thought I was just dreaming at the time. So, I'm laying super still when the doll walks past my parents' bed and to the end of our bed. It peeked its head around the corner and then started moving really fast towards me. We both scream at the top of our lungs and jump to our parents' bed. My parents both wake up and my dad is super pissed. My mom recalls to this day waking up to that creepy Cat in the Hat doll and seeing it standing and moving its head. She said as soon as she looked at it, it fell limp on the floor. My dad never believed us, but my mom witnessed it. 3 people all witnessed the exact same thing. This story takes place in 2017. It isn't a very eventful story, as far as paranormal encounters go, but I personally find those to be the most believable. My best friend, I'll call her Lex, and I were having a sleepover at my dad's house. I was 16 at the time, her being 17. We often had sleepovers on Fridays where we would eat junk food, watch as much Netflix as possible, and have deep conversations. This night was no different, and so unremarkable that I've forgotten everything we did. That is, of course, until we were trying to fall asleep in my bed. I remember being completely exhausted, slowly but surely drifting off, despite sharing a bed with someone. I was just on the brink of sleep when Lex got my attention. First, she simply asked if I was awake. I grunted in response, signalling her to continue. It should be said that I was quite literally a minute or 2 away from unconsciousness, so I didn't pick up on her tone of voice or think much of what she said next. "I'm going to use the bathroom downstairs," she told me, getting off the bed. This wasn't normal, her announcing that she would be slipping away to use the restroom, but I was too out of it to be annoyed or curious. Not long after she left, probably no more than 10 seconds, it started happening. Again, I was on the precipice of sleep, so my mind wasn't racing with thoughts or in any state to freak myself out. Nevertheless, I became filled with the feeling of impending danger, out of absolutely nowhere. I was becoming very lucid very quickly, as dread and anxiety overwhelmed me. I had never felt this kind of acute fear before, nor seemingly out of nowhere. Now wide awake, I opened my eyes and stared at the wall less than a foot away from my face, as I slept facing away from the bedroom door. My heart raced as I tried to understand the situation, but I didn't move. Something told me that moving would be a very bad idea. My room was pitch black as well, so that didn't help matters. All I could think about was how scared I was and how I hoped Lex would return soon. I can guess that a few minutes passed like this, when suddenly the bed dips on the side I'm not occupying, as if someone was getting on it. Problem was, not only did Lex struggle to get on my bed due to its height, but my bedroom door had never opened. At this point, I was petrified, and I only became more afraid as I felt something against the back of my body. It felt like a person just gently pressed against me. I thought to myself hysterically that there was no way this was actually happening. I held my breath to better isolate the feeling, horrified to feel the presence moving as if it was breathing too. In and out, pressed against me. In and out. The atmosphere is still suffocating in the room, filled with what I can only describe as evilness. The aura of whatever was touching me screamed danger. Don't move. I will hurt you. My mind and heart are racing as I try to think of a way out of this. The only balm I have to lessen my anxiety is the fact I know Lex will eventually return. But what happens then? She wouldn't see whatever it was pressed against me when she entered the bedroom, too occupied with making sure she wasn't disturbing my sleep. So I told myself that once I heard the door open, I would address her and ask her to turn on the lights. After what I would come to find out was about half an hour, Lex finally did return. The second I heard the door open and light flooded into the bedroom, I called her name. She hesitated, her soft voice replying, "Yes?" I requested bluntly, "Turn on the lights." She did as I asked, and I shot like a bullet from my previous position, whipping around to inspect the area I felt the presence of. There was nothing. I wouldn't notice right away, but later I realised that the horrifying aura that was plaguing my bedroom had vanished once Lex arrived. It was gone just as suddenly as it appeared. Still, I was in a state of horror for the next few hours. We watched some cartoons together and decided to sleep with the lights on, but not before talking about what just happened. Lex revealed to me that the reason she had gone downstairs wasn't to use the restroom, but to call her boyfriend for emotional support. She told me that she felt panicked, wanting to leave the room to escape from the stifling feeling. Lex couldn't get a hold of him and spent the next 30 minutes or so trying to calm herself down. In the morning, Lex and I confided in my dad, the only other person in the house. He was rightly disturbed and told us that he had a nightmare that night. I can't remember what his nightmare consisted of, only that it was a really bad one. My dad's a veteran, so he's not easily spooked, but it left him uneasy. The fact my dad had a nightmare or all this made this whole experience more notable to me. To wrap things up, I want to say that I had improperly used a spirit board a few years before this, with a few of my friends at my dad's house. We were children, so we didn't take it any more seriously than another Halloween game. Nothing of this magnitude occurred before though, just this one night. Lex and I were able to acquire holy water from one of the teachers at our high school after she told him the story. We used it to cleanse my bedroom. Nothing strange has happened to me or my dad since. I'm currently going through a divorce, and about 2 months ago, I voluntarily left my home to my soon-to-be ex-wife and our 3 kids, until we could come to an agreement on a living situation. She doesn't have a family in our state, and I do. We had many things happen over there. Shadow dashing in the wall, phantom voices coming from rooms no one was in, and even the shadow of what looked like a little girl jumping out of a bed in the middle of the night. These occurred on a weekly basis. I even had 3 paranormal investigators go to my home, and we all saw the little girl dart behind the island in the kitchen. Here at my mom's, I stay in my childhood bedroom that's adjacent to a bathroom with a barn door. The barn door doesn't roll. A few times at night from the corner of my eye, I could see something moving back and forth in the bathroom. It got to the point where I just set up a curtain so I didn't have to see in there. My sister, who also lives with my mother, has 2 small dogs. At times, they both would tense up and stare at absolutely nothing and begin to bark. One night, we were watching TV in the living room and they both jumped off the couch and seemed to be following someone who wasn't there. They go into a bedroom. We hear a small bang and they start barking and run back to the couch. My mom wrote it off as them following a fly, and I think differently. Last night, I went to bed at around 10. I'm a light sleeper, so I heard commotion around 3 AM in my bathroom and woke up. I figured it was the dogs playing in the bathroom as they have free reign of the house. When they're making noise, we just call out their names and they run out of the room. I did this 3 times and they never came out. On the 4th call out, my sister who sleeps down the hall yells out, "They're here on my bed." I felt my body turn white and I just stared at the curtain. There's still commotion in the bathroom, but I clearly hear someone pacing barefoot on the tile floor. Out of nowhere it stops, and I just wait for someone to come out until 7 AM, where the sun starts to brighten the room, and I fall back asleep. When I was in middle school, I came home from checking my grades online at my friend's house. When I entered my house, I noticed my family was gathering in the living room, so I decided to see what was going on. So it happens that my dad found some old doll in our garage. Mind you, my dad went to yard and garage sales a lot, and would always bring me Barbies and stuff to play with. Let me tell you, everything in that room denied ever seeing the hideous thing. I would have known, but I had never seen it. Here's her description. This fucking doll was like 4 feet something, with hideous 80s clothing, and it had a damn mullet. Okay, so we were all like, fuck that, and threw it in the garage again so my grandma could take it to some kids in Mexico. Well, when the time came for my grandma to go, we lived in Colorado, and she was on her way to Mexico. She was in New Mexico when she got in a bad car accident, and everything they had was either lost, damaged, or in some bags. That goddamn doll was 100% okay. They brought the damn thing back, and my grandma was on the bed rest for a solid 3 months. She said she would hear footsteps at night, and when my brother and I were watching TV, our blender would turn on, and then our TV would go out. Well, one day, I was pissed, and I got the doll and went to throw it away at our local park. Our house wasn't rid of paranormal shit. One night, I precisely went to bed at 11:15 and woke up at around 1 a.m. feeling dizzy and sick as fuck. I was sweating so bad. I felt everything turning and something choked me so hard I lost my breath, but it let go. I sat up and I remember yelling so loud for so long because no one could hear me. I felt the floor moving under me and I couldn't get up. Finally, my brother heard and tried to open the door. It was locked. It took him like 5 minutes till he could get inside, and he said my face was so white, it looked like I was dead. Well, my mom was like, what the fuck is going on? And I told her. She freaked out. The next day, she took me to a healer to cleanse my hand because I had touched something that someone my age shouldn't have handled. She knew there was some negative shit on that doll and forbade me to go to the park where I threw it because it could mean something really bad would happen. Well, my dumbass went to the park like half a year after and there was no doll. I was swinging with my friend when we saw it over the lake. There it fucking was. Head out, looking dead straight at us. Well, fuck that. That year we lost our house and had to relocate. I started having bad suicidal thoughts after that. I've always wondered if that thing latched onto me, and if that's why I always see a bunch of crap. I just wanted to share this with the world. Maybe it's not like Chucky, but possessed dolls are a real deal. I had an encounter with a shadow person out of the blue. Literally the most random of times, and I swear it made me crazy. I was talking with a friend of mine when I looked out my window and saw a black, faceless figure looking at me from behind my tree. I remember I blinked like 5 times and it wouldn't disappear, so I freaked the fuck out and yelled at my friend to hurry up and close my curtain. She freaked. I didn't look outside after that. I don't know what happened. What I do know is the months following, I was in a very depressed state, and I couldn't really eat or do anything but cry. I couldn't sleep at night until 5 a.m. when the sun would start to come up. One night, I smoked a blunt, and I had a big frame with the Virgin Mary. Sometime after midnight, I looked at it, and her eyes were rolling around. That whole 6-month period felt like hell. I heard footsteps in my hall at night that would run rapidly and then stop and then start again. I'd always just the feeling that someone was there. I mean, when I saw the shadow, it didn't have a face, but I felt the intensity of its watch. It stayed engraved in me. Well, it was getting worse. I was getting worse, skinnier and skinnier, and my mom called a curandero over to our house. She did this weird-ass thing with a Bible, some alcohol and a plant. We prayed for a solid 30 minutes and she rubbed some alcohol on my hand. She said that my soul wasn't in my body. It needed to find me again. When we got scared, it leaves through the top of our head. She said I felt like I was being watched because I was trying to come back but couldn't. Needless to say, as soon as she left, I knocked the fuck out. I hadn't gotten sleep like that for months. I started dreaming again. I gained my appetite and I don't feel like I'm being watched. I still feel footsteps, but it's not all the same feeling. Just wanted to share this with you all. Do you all have any similar experiences? About 2 weeks ago, on Thursday, July 25th, That night I had a dream. Can't make shit of it really now, but I remember very clear images still, because when I woke up, I was like, what the fuck? I remember seeing someone, a body, not specific, looks to have drowned, laying face down on some rocks. I don't remember anything else. I don't know if I dreamt up a scenario. I don't know. But when I have dreams like that, it's always very emotional. I got a very big headache, specifically on the right side of my head. I went about my day. I'm a barista. Went to work, I was cleaning up some tables and I saw a newspaper. Holy fucking shit. The dead body was right fucking there. On print. My dream, a reality. I was losing my shit. When I got home, I sat down. Thought, who the fuck was it? For some weeks, a former student at my high school had gone missing. I graduated 2017, so I had no idea what could have happened, who he interacted with, etc. I busted up my map. I pinned his last reported point of location where the body was found. I came to the conclusion that it was him. There was a 100% possible chance his body floated 2 miles away in the river. Reason I went all FBI mode was because of the dream, and the body wasn't recognisable. It was going to take days to be able to ID. Kid disappeared May. Reason why his body's unrecognisable, possibly? Now what really caught my attention was a Facebook post where he posted that someone was following him in February. Could I have something to do? I don't know. I suspect foul play. Reason I write here is because, yes, now, days later, the body was identified as the missing student, but the cause of death is unknown. I believe this individual's soul reached out to me and was trying to tell me something. I think someone hit him on the side of his head, hence my headache. Symbolism. My toddler sleeps in his own room, and the other side of the house in his crib. On 2 occasions now, we've heard him talking to someone through the baby monitor we keep in his room. The first time was back around August. We heard him talking and figured it was just him talking to himself, as toddlers do. We paid it no attention and were falling asleep until we heard a clear and distinct, "Hey." The voice sounded like a grown man, but youthful and cheery. Me and my girlfriend both heard it and sat up at the same time. I grabbed my pistol and immediately headed to his room to inspect. No one was there. I checked the surrounding rooms to find the same. My toddler was wide awake and seemed fine and happy. We were trying to come up with a solution to what we heard. We thought maybe it was one of his toys, yet none are in his reach or motion activated. Lord knows he has plenty of those that talk. None of them have a voice line that just says, "Hey," though. Not with that voice we heard, or without playing music and or talking more than just that. We searched the web, as people do, and thought maybe the monitor was picking up a radio signal from a nearby station, or possibly an emergency line or fire scanner. That still could be a possibility, but it seemed too clear and just the one word with nothing else, and not even a touch of static or interference. Who knows? We mostly forgot about it in the following weeks. Tonight, just less than an hour ago, my girlfriend and I were laying down for bed. I got up to use the bathroom moments later when our toddler started calling for Dada over the monitor. I mostly just smiled and continued to the bathroom until he said, "Can you hear me?" in a kind of confused questioning tone. The kind he uses when repeating something you've said to him for the first time. That made me pause. He's never said those words or even heard that phrase to my knowledge. My girlfriend turned up the volume on the monitor, confused too. I was standing at the bathroom door and she was laying on the bed holding the baby monitor to her ear and began saying she could hear whispering. Whispering while our toddler was still calling loudly for Dada. Again, I grabbed my pistol and inspected, girlfriend following close behind. Again, the same story. No one in his room or anywhere else in the house. He seemed fine and happy standing in his crib. We asked him who he was talking to several times, with no real answer, other than him giggling and saying, "Hey mama, hey dada." I went to the bathroom as I was going to before. While in there, I heard our toddler say, "Tony," to my girlfriend. She said he had put his finger to his lips when he was telling her to shush when he said it. He's never said that before. Tony was his great uncle who died years before his birth, and before me and my girlfriend got together. His house used to be right beside where our current one is. I say our house, but we live in a trailer, which is only 2 years old and was moved here 2 years ago. We don't talk about Tony. I wouldn't have much to say, being as I've never met him. He passed away in the hospital, but I've heard the stories of spirits sticking to the land or house they lived in. Also, the stories of children seeing people who have passed away. Has anyone else ever experienced this sort of thing with their children? And is it something I should be concerned about? One night, as I was laying in bed, I suddenly heard a strange noise coming from my bathroom. It sounded like a distant scream, but I knew I was alone in the house. I tried to ignore it at first, but the noise persisted and grew louder. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. I reluctantly got out of bed and made my way to the bathroom, my heart racing with fear. As I reached the door, the screaming grew louder and more intense. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I would find on the other side, but I knew I had to investigate. I slowly pushed the door open and peered inside. To my surprise, the source of the noise was the drain in the shower. It was making a horrific, high-pitched shrieking sound. I stood there, frozen in shock, as the noise continued to fill the room. I didn't know what to do. After a few moments, the noise suddenly stopped. The silence was almost as unsettling as the screaming had been. I cautiously stepped into the bathroom, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. The drain was just a normal drain, and the bathroom was empty. I still don't know what caused the drain to make that noise, but I never heard it again. To this day, the memory of that night still haunts me. One day, I was going on a camping trip with friends. The day went on regularly. The forecast said sunny day and cold night. This was around the end of autumn and beginning of winter. We were just doing regular camping things, lighting a fire, roasting some hot dogs, telling stories, etc. Time comes to go into the little hut we've built by hand through the years, and the campfire was basically completely extinguished by that point. We go in and go into our sleeping bags, ready to tell stories till we go to sleep. Unfortunately, the hike to the campsite is very rough, and I lost one of my underlayers of clothing, so I was colder than usual, and couldn't fall asleep as easily. So all my friends went to sleep successfully, and I was just waiting to do so as well. Until a shining light that made the campsite bright as day went up. I didn't look at it directly as I was laying down, but I saw the very bright light through the windows of the hut we made. It was very sudden, and was coming from the since extinguished fire. I got up to take a look at it, and it looked like there was a person next to the campfire. So I woke my friends up to confirm I wasn't just being delirious, due to hunger and sleeplessness. And they confirmed what they saw was what I saw. But before long, the shining light and almost day-like lightning around us was gone. I know that sometimes fires relight after a bit, but this was no regular fire. This was a magnesium-type shining flame, but on a massive scale. To make it worse, the coldest yet dry night forecast suddenly turned into a horrible hailstorm, with hail as big as half a human fist. Thankfully, we built the hut to withstand such conditions, but it was still horrifying. The next part, I don't know if it's factual or just my delirium, as my friends went back to sleep. But during the hailstorm, that mind you was so aggressive it muted nearly any other sound with its bumps on the roof and its white noise, I could hear footsteps on the wet leaves right outside our hut, under the extent part of the roof. This, however, could have been an animal or a delirious hallucination of mine. We've not spoken about this ever again since that day. I talked about it to my father, but he just played it off as just a fire relighting, and me being scared. This happened more than a year ago. I am to this day very perplexed and traumatized by this experience, And I really want any kind of explanation for it, preferably non-paranormal, but any kind of information will help me. I've experienced so much spiritual and paranormal stuff in my life. Younger years, walked out of my bedroom and into the den in the middle of the night, and could see my mum at the kitchen table with a candle lit in front of her, looking dead ahead. No movement, nothing. I snapped out of it and was so freaked out I couldn't go back to sleep alone. Next case was when I was sleeping in bed and was in the middle of a dream where I was watching baseball or hearing a baseball crowd, and I could feel two fingers walking across my shoulder and arm, like when you use your fingers to make it look like a person walking. Woke fully up and there was nobody there. Midday nap, definitely not part of my dream. College era, saw about 3 paranormal demonic entities on separate occasions. One was kneeled down next to my bed that resembled a woman I was in college, except she had a shiny and glossy face, almost like a porcelain doll, and was murmuring something but eventually disappeared. Second one resembled my grandmother with her back turned, and then turned to face me. And the third one was a shadow person, about halfway through the floor in front of my closet in the middle of the night, and was definitely a darker shadow than the darkness in my room, because I could make out a body shape and a wide brim hat. Years later, started getting bloody scratches on my back and shoulders that were 3 or 4 claw marks that were kind of bleeding and would burn when they started to appear. Much of the time, I was awake and during the day or morning or evening, and not even touching that part of my body when they would appear. That kept on for years here and there. More recent years, hearing my name called, hearing demonic voices wheeze laughing or just saying things. Saw a serpent-like angelic being watching over me that looked like it was thousands of years old. Had someone with a deep voice try to comfort me and even knew my name and placed their hand on my shoulder. Saw myself trying to get back into my body laying on the couch, coming from behind my head, after my spirit was being chased by some demonic entity in this alternate shadowy, dimly lit dimension of my same apartment as I was asleep. Also recorded footage of banging and stuff going on in the kitchen as I was asleep, and an audible voice saying, "Hey," near the phone speakers, and a visible distortion in the video when that happened. Also, walk into my bathroom and drew an image of patterns all on the mirror, using water from the faucet, and didn't know how I had done it until I had woken up the next morning. Saw an image of an African American man dancing in front of me one night when I woke up suddenly. So yeah, been through some stuff. I have quite a few experience with sleep paralysis, starting when I was around 14. At the time, there were other disturbing paranormal experiences happening in my home, around me specifically. The dreams vary, but the common occurrence is I'm out of my body and can see my physical body asleep in bed. But I'm either being held back or being dragged away from my physical body, when all I'm trying to do is get back to my body. This has been reoccurring periodically since I was 14, normally when I'm in a very weak emotional or psychological state. I'm now 26. Lately, I've been experiencing similar things, but slightly different. The best way I can describe it is, it's like I'm lucid dreaming, but not really. I don't really have control over the dream and what I'm doing, but it's like I'm conscious and I know I'm dreaming. And I know it's a bad dream that has the same feeling as my sleep paralysis experiences. I know I need to wake up and feel like I'm in danger. I try hard to wake up, and after persisting, usually can force myself to wake up by trying to scream. For this next part, I should include that my stepmom considers herself a spiritual person, and when I had the first experience, she taught me how to protect myself. I'm skeptical of this working, but it gives me peace of mind, so I use it. Last night, I had a dream, and like I described, I could tell I was dreaming. The dream wasn't anything too bad or good, it was just random. But it had a dark and evil feeling to it. I knew I had to wake up. I tried hard to wake up and couldn't. While still asleep, I started saying my protection prayer and imagining my white light encasing myself. When I started my protection prayer, I felt something I've never experienced, that felt like something pulling out of my body to the left of me. This scared me so badly, I tried to move in the opposite direction, and I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was in my room in my bed. I tried to get out of bed for the right of me, but could not move properly. I just kind of started to roll out of bed and scream. This is when I woke up, completely laying flat in bed. These experiences horrify me and feel like I'm very vulnerable and under attack. Has anyone experienced anything similar? I'll do the backstory first. Our rental home and a house across the street are the oldest on our block. I want to say both built before 1910. My neighbours were two older Vietnam veterans who had always had paranormal experiences in their home, but nothing scary. Just odd things getting moved around, doors slammed, and really loud noises. They would talk with the ghosts apparently. The guy who actually owned the home died of cancer, and his best friend was forced to move because he couldn't afford to buy it, sadly. The owner's asshole kids sold to a developer, and they tore the place down. My renter works from home and has her desk right next to the front door. For several months after the house was torn down, she'd be working with the front door closed and would clearly be able to hear the outside door that went into the sunroom being opened and someone walking. Her dog would be a little on edge and bark a little. Nobody was ever there, so we decided the ghosts from the Vietnam veterans' house temporarily moved over to our rental house before actually passing on. We're all friends with the best friend of the owner, so when she told him what happened, he said that must be what's going on. We all thought it was really cool, and I truly hope the new ugly monstrosity that was built in its place is haunted, because they probably pissed off the spirits that lived on that property. I'm from a big family, and we're from a small town or country area, a farming family. Well, I had two great-great-grandmothers as a child. My great-great-grandmother on my father's side was called Grammy. Grammy lived in the house her late husband had built for her many decades earlier. Grammy was an incredible woman, independent until the day she died at 104 years of age. She made her own wine, from berries she grew and picked, and said wine was the key to a long life. She also said things like, "I used to listen to the wolves as a kid before they exterminated in the area. You'll hear them here again by the time you're an adult. I just know it. I've seen it." Crazy thing is, she was right. She was always right about that sort of stuff. But that's not the weird part. Grammy and my great-grandmother claimed, not publicly but to family, to be able to talk to spirits. Most people in the family brushed this off, but they would know things that seemed to be impossible to know unless they talked to the person. This was pre-internet, so it really caught people off guard. Okay, so now to the weird stuff. Grammy ended up in the nursing home due to a double hip break. She really took a turn for the worse that week. I was pretty young still, but I remember my dad, who worked ridiculously long hours, spending all his times he would have slept, keeping her company instead. One night he came home and said Grammy was in good spirits. I want to be a little while later. Now, I've always dreamed incredibly real, lucid dreams. That night I dreamed I was outside riding big wheels with my sister. My dad's truck pulled into our very long country driveway at a very high rate of speed. He was beyond upset, saying Grammy had passed away just after he left the night before. I woke up feeling so confused. It seemed so real. Later that day, my sister asked me to ride big wheels. All of a sudden, my dad's truck pulls in, coming in hot. He jumped out the truck, and I could tell he'd been crying, something he just didn't do. He called us inside. Shortly after, he explained Grammy had passed away. I spoke up, saying, "Just after you left last night, right?" My dad looked like he had seen a ghost. He couldn't understand how a small child knew that, or would even guess that. To this day, I've never told him about the dream. The thing is, my dream matched word for word what my dad said, up to the point I said something. So weird. A week later, the family was going through the house. I lived writing at a young age, and my brother had gone down to the old basement to see a desk my Grammy used to write at. I went down there to find him, but all I saw through the dusty light provided by a small window was the desk. Half the room was lit poorly, the other half darker than night. As I was wondering where my brother was, a small toy tractor rolled out from the darkness. I recoiled in fear and said, "That's not funny." From the top of the stairs, I heard my brother ask, "What's not funny?" I ran. I never entered that house again. Years later, I was 17. My great-grandfather was dying a horribly painful death due to extensive cancer. I went to see him one night, and he was no longer able to really talk. Everyone was hugging him, telling him they loved him, as he was getting worse. When I hugged him, I said, "I love you, Grandpa." He whispered in my ear, "I love you too." That night I dreamt of him, and I sitting in my grandparents' house, like we always did for get-togethers. He looked at me from his chair and said, "You know I'm dying, right?" I said, "No, Grandpa, the treatment worked, you'll be fine." He said, "No, I'm dying as we speak." I woke up and sat straight up in bed, sweating. It was around 2 a.m. That morning, my dad wasn't gone for work. He was home. It wasn't normal. I was eating cereal at the dinner table when he walked up and grabbed my shoulder from behind. I glanced up at his face, and it said everything. He looked down at me, said in a breaking voice, "He's gone. He passed about 2 this morning." Broke my heart. Over the next 2 years, my great-grandmother began to go downhill. I tried to visit when I could, but I lived almost 2 hours away. I remember the last time I saw her, I walked into her house expecting to see her in the kitchen. I could hear her talking to someone. It sounded like 2 distinctly different voices. One I recognised, being my great-grandmother, and the other, I couldn't place it. I didn't see any other cars in her driveway, so I was super confused. I called out, "Hey, Grandma." She said, "Come on in, I'm just talking to a friend." Confused, I walked into the living room and saw only my grandmother. No TV on, no radio, just her in a chair with a smile on her face. We began to talk and I said, "You must have been watching TV or on the phone when I got here." "No, I was just talking to an old friend. I do that these days. I get lonely here, so they visit." I kind of shook it off and went to her basement to grab something. As I was down there, I clearly heard her say, "Yeah, that's my grandson. He's so nice to visit. He's downstairs." Then I got the chills as I heard what clearly sounded like someone walking down the stairs, but no one was there. That's when my grandma, her daughter, explained that she and Grammy claimed to talk to spirits. I had seen and experienced enough weirdness over the years to start to believe it. A few months later, I had one of those dreams. This time, it was my great-grandma. Back in a living room, but this time when I walked into the living room, I saw them. I saw the people she was talking to. They all seemed so happy. No one seemed to even acknowledge me being there. They were saying they were so happy to see her again. It freaked me out. The next day, I got a call from my dad. I could tell he was shaky. He said, "Great-grandma passed away." I asked how. She was a larger woman, and she was getting an EMS-assisted lift to go to the hospital. They dropped her. Her heart stopped and they couldn't get her to come back. It was a horrible accident, but it was her time. It clicked in my head that the reason she could see him in that dream was because she was also dead. They were no longer the voices of old friends, but they were really there. Thinking about it still makes me feel weird.